There's a reason why some people get rich while the rest spend their entire lives just trying to appear successful. And no, it's not luck. It's not cheap internet motivation. And it's definitely not working yourself to exhaustion like you've been taught since childhood. The truth is much more uncomfortable. The system admires busy people, but rewards strategic people. While millions are distracted trying to flaunt a life they haven't yet built, there's a silent group accumulating assets, influence, alliances, and freedom away from the spotlight. They understood something Machiavelli already saw centuries ago. Those who show off too much lose their advantage. Those who talk too much give away power, and those who constantly try to prove their wealth are usually still very far from it. The most curious thing is that the modern world has practically trained people to fail financially without realizing it. They taught you to consume before you build, to appear rich before you become rich, to trade time for money while others build systems that keep running even while they sleep. And maybe this hurts to hear, but a large part of the population will never get rich because they are emotionally addicted to validation. They need to show off every achievement. They need to impress strangers. They need to maintain an image that is too expensive for their own reality. Meanwhile, the real players seem ordinary, sometimes even too discreet. And precisely for that reason, they grow without arousing resistance early on. In this video, you'll understand the 7 silent principles that separate the top 1% from the rest of the world. Principles based on strategy, perception, emotional control, building invisible wealth, and decisions guided by reality, not motivational fantasies. You'll realize why strategic invisibility is a weapon, why depending on a single income is dangerous, why ostentation weakens, and why the most powerful men almost never seem desperate to be noticed. Because in the end, real wealth doesn't make noise. It builds power silently while the rest of the world remains distracted. Window shopping. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. Some people think wealth makes a lot of noise, but those who truly understand the game realize something uncomfortable. The most powerful money almost always moves in silence. The person who needs to prove their prosperity is usually still trying to convince themselves that they've won. But the man who understands Machiavelli understands that better to be feared than loved doesn't mean being constantly visible. It means being impossible to ignore when he decides to act. And look how curious. The greatest players in real life rarely look like players. They wear simple clothes, drive discreet cars, enter quietly, and leave even more quietly. While half the world tries to look like millionaires by paying for appearances on credit, the other half is buying assets in silence. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, teaches exactly this. Excessive appearance attracts attention, and too much attention attracts envy, demands, and invisible enemies. The guy flaunts his watch before building wealth. He buys status before buying freedom. And then he enters a modern prison where he needs to maintain an expensive image just to feed the egos of others. It's hard to admit this, but many poor people are financially broken precisely because they try to look rich too early. True power almost never arrives by shouting. It observes first, it learns first, it grows first, and only then, perhaps, does it appear. There's a stark difference between being recognized and being traceable. Intelligent people learn early on that strategic invisibility is a social armor, because when nobody understands exactly how much you have, nobody knows exactly how much they can take from you. And this applies to fake friends, opportunistic family members, self-serving partners, and even professional environments. How many times has someone started earning more money and suddenly faced requests, emotional demands, and comparisons? Exactly. Machiavelli warned about the true nature of humanity centuries ago. Decisions based on true human nature will always be more efficient than emotional naivete. A simple example of this is the businessman who continues to live below his means even after growing. Not because he's miserly, but because he understands the calculated use of force. He knows that accumulated capital is worth more than temporary applause. While one person buys a car to impress strangers at a traffic light, another buys stakes in companies, shares in Apple Inc., Microsoft Corporation, or real estate funds that continue to pay while he sleeps. It seems less glamorous, but that's exactly where the game changes. The end justifies the means when the ultimate goal is independence, not validation. And perhaps the most dangerous part of ostentation isn't even the money lost, but the mindset it creates, because the person starts living to be seen, not to build. They lose focus, they trade depth for the appearance of virtue, and this silently destroys any chance of solid growth. Virtue and fortune go hand in hand, but fortune without discipline evaporates quickly. The wise man learns to appear ordinary while building something extraordinary. He understands that his own loyal armies are worth more than impressed crowds. That's why he carefully chooses who enters his life. He doesn't reveal all his plans. He doesn't publicize every achievement. He doesn't turn goals into social entertainment. And ironically, the less he tries to appear powerful, the more dangerous he becomes, because no one can predict his next moves. Constant adaptability also involves this: knowing when to appear and when to disappear. Some people give away their entire strategy before the battle even begins, and then they wonder why life always seems stuck. But there's an even deeper issue hidden in all this, because invisibility without structure is still vulnerability. And that's where few perceive the next move in the game. Most people believe that stability comes from a fixed salary, but stability built on a single source is an elegant illusion. Just one layoff, an economic crisis, or a market shift, and everything starts to tremble. The man who understands Machiavelli observes this coldly. Whoever depends on a single financial entry point has placed their own destiny in the hands of others. And that is dangerous, very dangerous. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, means seeing the world as it truly works, not as one would like it to work. Companies lay off people, markets change, technologies replace entire professions. So the intelligent person begins to build silent financial fortresses. A primary income can pay the bills, but secondary incomes build freedom. While many people spend years discussing the appearance of wealth, the most strategic are creating small rivers of money that together become an ocean. You can start simple: dividends, online income, video editing, consulting, digital products, YouTube channels, affiliate marketing, equipment rental, participation in smaller businesses. The secret is not to start big. It's to stop depending on a single financial breath. There's a brutally true phrase that few like to hear. Financial vulnerability breeds emotional submission. The person who depends on a single salary often swallows humiliation because they have no choice. They accept toxic environments, they accept disrespect, they accept living in exhaustion because they fear losing their only source of income. And that's where Machiavelli's strategic thinking comes in. It's better to be feared than loved, but before that, one must be independent enough not to need to beg for approval. The financially strong man thinks like a general building his own loyal armies. Each new source of income is like an additional soldier defending his freedom. A practical example: imagine someone who works during the day, but at night builds a dark web channel, learns copywriting, invests in ETFs like the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF, or develops internationally marketable digital skills. At first it seems slow, it seems small, but the calculated use of force never depends on emotional speed. It depends on strategic consistency. While some spend energy trying to appear important, others are silently reducing their own fragility in the face of life. And the less dependent someone becomes, the harder it is to manipulate them. But there's a detail that separates those who merely make money from those who truly build power. Diversification doesn't mean desperately chasing everything at once. That destroys focus. The intelligent person creates interconnected systems. They understand virtù and fortuna as a combination of preparation and opportunity. That's why they choose skills that can complement each other. An editor learns marketing. A student learns sales. A creator learns investments. A doctor learns business. Little by little, each piece strengthens the other. And this completely changes how they see the world. Because when someone knows they have many doors open, fear begins to lose its power. Anxiety decreases. Posture changes. Decisions become colder, more strategic. Decisions based on real human nature show that money doesn't just buy comfort, it buys room for choice. And room for choice changes everything. But curiously, there's a silent mistake that destroys even people who manage to earn a lot of money. They continue to spend like someone who is emotionally impoverished. And that's exactly where the next principle is born. There's a huge difference between appearing rich and building real power, and almost no one realizes this early on. The average person increases their income and immediately raises their standard of living to impress people who don't even really like them. They unnecessarily upgrade their cell phone, finance an absurdly expensive car, buy clothes to appear to belong to a group, and turn their own money into a temporary spectacle. But Machiavelli would see this as emotional weakness disguised as success. Because the strategic man understands a hard truth. Every purchase is a silent exchange for future freedom. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, means accepting that misused money enslaves even those who earn well. There are doctors in debt, bankrupt businessmen, influencers without assets, people who seem powerful online but live pressured by invisible bills. Meanwhile, the seemingly ordinary person is accumulating assets in silence. They understand that the appearance of virtue is worth less than invisible solidity, and that's why they choose the mundane when the mundane strengthens their position, not because they can't spend, but because they understand the true emotional cost of needing to constantly maintain an image. The intelligent man treats money like a soldier, not an emotional toy. Every real Brazilian currency needs to have a strategic function, and this completely changes his relationship with consumption. He doesn't ask, "Will this impress?" He asks, "Does this increase my freedom?" It seems simple, but almost no one lives like that. The guy buys a luxury car financed in 70 installments when he could use part of that capital to build something that would generate cash for the next 10 years. The end justifies the means when the goal is true independence. A practical example of this is someone who chooses to live 2 or 3 years below their own standard while building solid investments. It may seem boring to others. It may seem like a boring life, But while many live trying to look like kings, he is buying his own kingdom little by little. He can invest in Nvidia Corporation stock, real estate funds, smart fixed income, or even structured digital businesses that grow silently. And here's something important. Frugality is not avarice. It's not living miserably. It's eliminating emotional waste. It's spending where it really matters and cutting what exists only to feed social ego. Better to be feared than loved also means not depending on the aesthetic approval of others to feel worth. And you know what's even more curious? The more financially disciplined someone becomes, the more mental clarity begins to emerge, because debt generates psychological noise. Excessive consumption generates invisible anxiety. Constant comparison destroys focus, so the strategic man simplifies. He understands virtù and fortuna as a balance between practical intelligence and patience. He doesn't try to prove anything every week. He doesn't engage in useless social races. While others compete for appearances, he accumulates room for maneuver, and room for maneuver completely changes how someone reacts to life. Decisions based on real human nature show that almost all ostentation stems from emotional neediness, not true abundance. Your own loyal armies are worth more than temporary applause. Constant adaptability requires financial reserves, a cool head, and the ability to act when opportunities arise. But there's an even deeper point in all this. Saving alone doesn't create exponential wealth. Saving money without strategic intelligence only slows down poverty. And that's exactly where the next move in the game comes in, the true equation of leverage. The biggest lie many people have been taught is that working harder automatically generates wealth. It doesn't. If pure effort solved everything, millionaire bricklayers would be commonplace. The problem is that most people have been trained to sell their time, while the real players learn to build systems. And here, Machiavelli would delve into an uncomfortable truth. Those who depend exclusively on their own time will always have a ceiling. Because the day still has 24 hours, no matter how hard someone works. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, demands accepting this without romanticism. The strategic man doesn't just seek income, he seeks leverage. He seeks mechanisms that continue producing even when he's not present. While many exchange energy directly for money, others are creating assets that scale. A YouTube video continues to generate revenue months later. An ebook continues to sell while the author sleeps. A shareholding continues to produce profit without constant presence. A smart investment grows silently for years, and suddenly the person realizes something almost frightening. Real wealth is born when money, technology, systems, and people start working for you. However, there's an important detail here. Building leverage requires abandoning the psychological addiction to immediate reward. Because at first, it seems unfair. The person works for months on something that doesn't yet yield visible returns. Meanwhile, they see other people flaunting quick gains and superficial results. But that's exactly where the wise man separates himself from the crowd. Better to be feared than loved also means enduring periods of invisibility while building structure. The calculated use of force rarely delivers instant gratification. It accumulates advantage silently until the game turns almost irreversibly. A practical example of this is someone who learns highly scalable digital skills: copywriting, video editing, automation, marketing, programming, traffic management. These skills may start by selling hours, but then evolve into systems, teams, products, and assets. The guy who used to do everything alone starts creating processes. He hires people. He automates parts of the work. He creates recurring revenue streams, and then something changes within him. For the first time, he realizes that wealth isn't about working non-stop. It's about controlling structures that continue to function even without his constant energy. Machiavelli would understand this perfectly. Armies that are their own and loyal always defeat isolated warriors. And perhaps the most powerful part of leverage is psychological. Because when someone stops depending exclusively on their own daily physical or mental effort, fear begins to diminish, anxiety decreases, the mind stops operating in constant survival mode. Virtù and fortuna begin to work together strategically. Man stops desperately chasing money and begins to position systems to automatically attract opportunities. It could be a channel that generates an audience, a newsletter, investments in Amazon.com, Inc. A digital businesses, scalable products, or even highly strategic networks of contacts. Decisions based on real human nature show that the world's greatest players are almost never those who work the hardest physically. They are those who best position resources, people, and influence. An appearance of virtue makes many people seem busy, but theatrical productivity doesn't build empires. Constant adaptability requires structural intelligence. And that's where many people realize something almost unsettling. Systems alone don't grow in a vacuum, because behind every great structure, there is something invisible that is worth even more than money: the right connections. The internet has led many to believe that influence is about quantity. Quantity of followers, quantity of likes, quantity of people watching. But the strategic man learns early on that crowds rarely mean real power. Sometimes it just means noise. Machiavelli would understand this immediately, because the greatest movements in history almost never began in front of the masses. They began in small rooms, discreet conversations, and silent alliances. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, shows that a single right connection can completely change the direction of someone's life. While thousands try to attract the attention of strangers, the smartest players invest time building relationships with a few extremely valuable people. An experienced mentor, a reliable partner, a strategic investor, a highly competent friend. Your own loyal armies are worth more than emotional crowds that disappear at the first sign of trouble. And perhaps this is difficult to accept at first, because the ego loves public numbers, it loves applause, it loves instant validation. But the best deals rarely appear in internet comments. They appear in private conversations, silent recommendations, and small circles where trust is worth more than appearances. There's a curious pattern among truly powerful people. They protect access. They don't give their energy to just anyone. They don't reveal all their plans. They don't surround themselves with noisy people. The idea that it's better to be feared than loved also involves the ability to select who deserves closeness, because every relationship exacts an invisible price. Some accelerate your vision, others slowly drain your ambition. The wise person learns to observe behavior before trusting words. They observe discipline, consistency, discretion, emotional capacity. A simple example of this is the entrepreneur who stops frequenting environments where everyone only talks about ostentation and starts to get closer to people who truly build wealth. Or the student who decides to connect with more advanced professionals in their field instead of remaining stuck in their usual comfortable group. The calculated use of power appears precisely there. The right connections create shortcuts that isolated effort would take decades to achieve. Sometimes a single conversation opens financial, professional, and mental doors impossible to predict. Meanwhile, those who desperately crave attention usually push away the most valuable people because they convey emotional neediness instead of solidity. And here's a truth that almost no one openly discusses. Powerful people prefer discretion. Virtù and fortuna are strengthened when someone learns to move around without constantly needing to impress. The most dangerous person at the table is usually not the loudest. It's the one who observes more than speaks. Decisions based on real human nature show that strong alliances are born from mutual utility, loyalty, and trust built over time, not from superficial enthusiasm. That's why the strategic person invests in developing value before seeking access. They learn skills, they solve problems, they become useful. Because true influence is born from the ability to generate results. It could be someone who masters editing, marketing, investments, sales, or management. The rarer their value, the more naturally powerful people begin to approach them. An appearance of virtue impresses for a few minutes. Silent competence creates lasting respect. Constant adaptability also requires this. Knowing how to navigate different environments without losing essence. But there's an even deeper detail, because even powerful alliances can become a prison when everything constantly depends on your presence. And that's exactly where the next level of the game emerges. Most people build a prison that looks like success. They work non-stop, solve everything on their own, control every detail, and then call it being indispensable. But the strategic man understands something uncomfortable. If everything depends exclusively on him, then he hasn't built freedom. He's built a sophisticated cage. Machiavelli would see this as operational vulnerability, because any structure that collapses without his constant presence is still weak. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires accepting that continuous effort without autonomy destroys even talented people. The individual becomes a hostage of his own business, his own routine, and even his own money. He can't rest without anxiety. He can't travel without chaos. He can't slow down because everything has been built around his presence. And ironically, the more indispensable he tries to appear, the further he gets from true wealth. The wise man thinks differently. He builds mechanisms, processes, people, automation, documentation, intelligent delegation. While many spend their days putting out fires, he works to ensure the system survives without needing his emotional energy all the time. There's a stark difference between working in the system and working for the system, and almost no one realizes this early on. The smart person starts small, organizing routines, creating simple processes, automating repetitive tasks, learning to delegate operational parts. It could be an editor who assembles a standardized workflow for clients, a creator who programs content in advance, an entrepreneur who hires someone for support while they focus on strategic growth. The calculated use of force appears precisely here because energy is limited, time is limited, attention is limited. So the strategic person stops wasting power on tasks that could be performed by systems or other trained people. Better to be feared than loved also means not being emotionally dependent on the feeling of absolute control. Many people don't delegate because deep down they like the artificial importance of being needed. But this destroys scalability. Loyal armies win wars precisely because they distribute functions intelligently. A classic example of this is companies like McDonald's or Amazon. The systems were designed to continue functioning independently of a single person. And that's precisely what transforms work into structure. But perhaps the most powerful part of the autonomous engine is its invisible psychological impact. Because when someone creates structures that function without constant presence, the mind finally gains space to think strategically. It leaves survival mode. It begins to see the long term. Virtù and fortuna operate with much more force when a person isn't trapped in micro-problems all day long. Decisions based on real human nature show that exhausted people make bad decisions. They become emotional, impulsive, reactive. Those with operational leeway, on the other hand, can act with composure and clarity. The appearance of virtue makes many people seem productive while living completely disorganized internally. Constant adaptability requires mental freedom, not just money coming in. And curiously, When someone becomes less visible within their own system, the more powerful they become. Because now they can move pieces without drawing attention. But there is one last principle that ties all the others together almost invisibly. A principle that defines who maintains power for decades and who awakens envy too early. There's a reason why some people manage to grow quietly for years while others face resistance far too early. It's not just money. It's not just intelligence. It's perception. The strategic man understands that the world reacts more to the image it forms of you than to your complete reality. And Machiavelli mastered this like few others. The appearance of virtue was never about gratuitous falsehood. It was about understanding how human nature works. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires accepting that excessively exposed success attracts something inevitable: envy, comparison, sabotage, and constant scrutiny. That's why the most dangerous players rarely show all their cards. They learn to appear less threatening than they really are. They don't correct every provocation. They don't display every result. They don't feel the need to win small arguments. While many try to appear extraordinary all the time, they cultivate a kind of strategic, apparent mediocrity. And this confuses people, because nobody attacks what they don't perceive as an immediate threat. The loudmouth attracts attention early. The silent one builds territory, while others are still distracted trying to be seen. And here's a truth few can bear to hear. Most people don't genuinely root for your growth. They root for you as long as you remain predictable. As long as you stay small enough not to emotionally threaten anyone. Decisions based on real human nature demonstrate this all the time. The wise man learns not to reveal his full growth rate. He learns to protect his plans before they become the target of public opinion. Better to be feared than loved doesn't mean creating unnecessary conflicts. It means building enough capacity to not depend emotionally on anyone's approval. A clear example of this is the entrepreneur who avoids flaunting his wealth while continuing to quietly expand investments. Or the creator who grows without turning every achievement into an emotional announcement. The calculated use of force appears precisely in this restraint, because power revealed too early awakens resistance too early. Your own loyal armies operate better away from the spotlight. Virtu and fortuna work more efficiently when there is strategic discretion. And this applies even to personal relationships. The less people fully understand your next steps, the harder it becomes to manipulate, anticipate, or block you. Perhaps the most interesting thing is realizing that appearing ordinary often offers absurd freedom. The strategic man enters environments without making a fuss. He observes more than he speaks. He learns more than he shows off. Constant adaptability demands precisely that. The ability to navigate different scenarios without carrying the weight of needing to impress all the time. While many spend energy building fragile public personas, he strengthens invisible structures. He invests in assets. He builds alliances. He learns valuable skills. He develops emotional intelligence. And when he finally decides to act visibly, he is already several steps ahead. The end justifies the means when the goal is true freedom, not instant applause. Because in the end, silent wealth isn't just about money. It's about autonomy, about being able to move without depending on collective validation, about building a life where your peace is worth more than appearances. And ironically, the less someone tries to prove they've won, the more dangerous they become to a system that depends on emotionally predictable people. Ultimately, quiet wealth has never been just about money. Money is a consequence. The real game has always been freedom. Freedom to choose, freedom to refuse, freedom to not have to humiliate yourself for approval, salary, status, or social validation. And perhaps the most important question is, how many decisions in your life today are truly yours? and how many were born simply from the need to look good in front of others. Because many people spend years chasing the appearance of power without realizing they are emotionally trapped. Trapped in comparison, trapped in consumerism, trapped in the constant need to be seen. Meanwhile, the most strategic men in the world continue building in silence. Machiavelli understood something that remains brutally relevant today. Whoever controls themselves is already several steps ahead of the crowd. And now you realize that real wealth doesn't begin in your pocket. It begins in your mindset. It begins when someone stops living emotionally exposed, when they learn to build assets instead of applause, when they understand that the calculated use of force is worth more than impulsiveness, that their own loyal armies are worth more than superficial crowds, that constant adaptability is more powerful than pride, and above all, when they accept that politics guided by reality, not ideals, is what separates those who only dream from those who truly build. So, let me ask you something. If no one could see your achievements, would you still be doing what you do today? Do you truly want freedom, or just the appearance of it? Which of these principles resonated with you the most? The ghost principle? The fortress principle? The war of perception principle? Write it in the comments because I want to understand which part of this game you've finally begun to see. And if this video opened your mind in any way, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because while most people remain distracted trying to impress the world, here you learn how to build real power without needing to ask permission.